Julian, you and I have been chatting, but I'd just like to say good morning to everyone watching from all corners of the world. I'm your host, James Desborough, and today the British American Business Council of Los Angeles is honoured to welcome Julian Fellowes to our screens as part of our distinguished speaker series. Julian is receiving the BABC LA honour for his contributions to transatlantic trade. It truly is special to sit in front of the creative genius who possesses a rare ability to connect in so many ways to audiences around the world, and especially between the UK and the US. He is one of the greatest storytellers in Hollywood. Julian is best known to most of our audiences for creating the multi-award-winning TV series, a movie trilogy, Downton Abbey, as well as HBO's The Gilded Age. Downton is the most watched drama in PBS history, and the films, including this summer's grand finale, have grossed around $400 million worldwide. As a creator, writer, and executive producer, Julian has picked up Emmys galore and provoked viewers with discussions on class, race, equality, wealth, emotion, health, welfare, and criminality, all set around the seemingly gentle background of an English country estate. Julian has been at the top of his game for decades, earning an Academy Award for Best Original Screenplay for the critically acclaimed Gosford Park. He collected Tony nominations for his writing on Broadway hits Mary Poppins and School of Rock, as well as being a celebrated novelist. And in 2011, he was elevated to Baron Fellows, giving him a seat in the House of Lords. The impact of his work has been significant for trade and commerce between the UK and US, generating well over $1 billion in revenue. That's quite an astonishing number. His entrepreneurial and creative drive and commercial success embodies the spirit of the BABC LA and other chapters, bringing US and UK businesses together to achieve greatness. So, Julian, I could go on describing your many skills and accolades, but the board of members are keen to hear from you on many of these subjects directly. So to start with, thank you obviously for joining us from your Florida home. And let's get down to business, literally, because you're often asked about your astonishing career from an entertainment reportage perspective. But today, from a business point of view, how do you reflect on your career success?
Well, I have to say that rather like my attempts to make money in property, whenever I've bought a building because I thought I would make money, I've lost a fortune. But when I buy a building because I love it, then I've made a fortune. And much the same is true of my career in show business, that people ask me about appealing to this audience and that percentage of the whatevers and so on and so on. I don't think you can do any of that. I think if you're in show business, and this is not original, I think you have to make shows and make films and so on that you want to see. And that is your best guideline. And when I watch stuff of mine, when I read scripts after I've left them for a month or two, I have to, the only thing that interests me is, am I bored? Am I still interested in this? Or am I thinking, oh, come on, what happens next? And that's really always been my guide. I think that you have to love it. But mind you, I'm not anti-business at all. I'm pro-business. And I think businessmen who are geniuses love it. And they have an instinct for this, and they know this is going to run and that isn't. And all of that I admire, and I have nothing but good things to say. I think that where you go wrong is when you get into it just for profit and you're trying to think with the wrong part of your brain. So for me, that hasn't been it. I have been making shows and writing musicals and so on that I wanted to see. And that's always been my principle, really.
Well, yeah, you've had the Midas touch, writing so many powerful projects and dramas especially, that really they appeal, I mean, not just to UK audiences, especially in the US you've had huge success and viewers worldwide. What do you think has been the key to that global appeal?
I can't really speak globally. because I think they have their own reasons. But I love America, and America and England are the two countries on earth that I really love, and I wish well, and I hope things go well for them. They're going through rather a bumpy time, perhaps at the moment, but as the two cultures of my adult life, I love them both. And indeed, when I first arrived in America in 1970 and stayed with the girlfriend of one of my father's cousins on Fifth Avenue, I knew almost immediately that I'd come to my other home, that I knew I was going to be happy in America, or where I am now. I'm now in Florida. And I think that helped me very much because I lived a fairly narrow life in a way. I mean, I lived a certain kind of English life, which you're familiar with. And I'm not attacking them. I've got, and nothing to say against them. But it was a way of looking at life that was quite simple and narrow. And we all go, every human being goes through a moment when they realize that what they thought were facts were in fact only their father's opinion. And similarly for me, I had come to realize that what I thought were facts about life were simply the facts of a very small group of people. And America helped me to see that. And America helped me to look at the world in a broader way and to see the things we had in common, which are many, but also the things we did not have in common. And I think that all of that, looking back, I think all of that was a preparation for my writing career when I was going to want to appeal to people beyond my own peculiar confines. And so I would try to find elements of stories and characters that were general as opposed to very specific. And I think that was part of my, I say training. I never had any proper training as a writer, but I had the training of life. And I think that America and England both made me who I was by the time I started to write.
I feel your words definitely resonate with so many people who are watching today in the business community. Certainly the impact of being in England and also experiencing the US and vice versa. People learn a lot from those cultural moments to build into the business and creative creatures that they become. So your words are very, very, very strong there. Now,
well, I think people learn a lot if they're open to learning a lot. And that, I think, is an important message to get through to the young. Don't feel you know everything too soon, because you don't. And what you want to do is stay open. This idea that you don't listen to people because you already disagree with them, I think is a great mistake. You should listen to people, however much you think you disagree with them, if only so that you're better armed when you're next having an argument with someone who has the same views. You should know where they're coming from. And that, I think, was an important thing that America taught me when I first came here. I was 21 and as green as the Green Bay tree. But nevertheless, I could see that America had something, had a kind of energy, had a kind of open door mentality that England didn't really, certainly not at that time. And I very much profited from it.
Thank you. I read out some of your amazing figures a moment ago and discussed some of your honors. But how do you define your success?
I'm not sure I know how to answer that, really. I don't know that one should spend too much time defining one's own success. I think that's for others to do. And on the whole, you should stay open to any new ideas. I mean, at the moment, I've got a couple of projects I'm working on with my son. And that in itself is very interesting to me because, I mean, he and I get on well, I'm happy to say, and agree about a lot of things, but we don't agree about everything. And you must always remember people come to their own conclusions. And I think never losing the sense that other people may have looked at all the evidence just like you, and they've come to a different conclusion. It shouldn't make you angry. It shouldn't make you, reach for your gun. It's interesting that people look at what you think are obvious facts, and yet they come to a different conclusion, and they're not fools, and they're not angry. They just think differently. And I think as much as you can keep remembering that and keep aware of that, then on the whole, your career can keep moving forward. And I suppose that for me, success, I don't know really what the word means in that sense, but I think success means people still wanting to work with you. And that is important to me. I want people to look at me and not see, a sad old figure in their 70s falling towards the grave. On the whole, I want them to look at someone who they'd like to do a project with. And that's what I hope to maintain. But I also want to, I mean, this now I sound as if I'm proselytizing, and of course I am really, but I want the young not to make barriers for themselves, not to make borders, but to just explore this world that they think they might be happy in. They think they might have something to do that they can do well. I mean, part of being young is finding out what you do well. And often it isn't what you would like to do well. I mean, if it was, we'd have 5 million football champions, But finding what you do well is one of the big searches of youth. And I want them to approach that with open minds and not automatically decide, oh, that's not for me, or she's got the wrong idea, or whatever it is. As far as you can, while being true to yourself, you should try and remain open to what other people have concluded about life, really.
A brilliant, brilliant answer. And I'll have to get beyond the tricky business questions now, because, the fans want to know. The grand finale finished Downton's run officially. However, everything in Hollywood, there are real no endings to everything. And I mean, fans want it. They always ask you. And commercially, we know how film studios are. So where do you stand? How could Downton return in some guise? And is it really the end?
Well, I mean, really, and I speak as truthfully as I know how to, which, as you know, in show business, there is a natural limit there. But I think that we have done with that group of people dealing with their problems. We've been with them for 15 years. We've seen the daughters go from young girls really into middle-aged women dealing with daily problems like everyone else. And I just feel, we just felt that on the whole, we had come to the end of that particular cycle. And those people will not be coming back with those actors, I'm not saying we'll never see Downton again. We might, and in different formats. I think it could be quite interesting if we do. But I just felt quite strongly that that group of us that started off in 2009, and, we have now hammered out more or less every human problem. And every marriage has gone wrong and right, and everyone's lost all their money, and then they've got it back, and then, so on and so on. And I just think it's time to let them go. And so that was, in a way, rather an interesting brief for the final film, because, with many shows that are popular, you're always slightly keeping it open that you can come back if people want you to, and so on. But we made the decision that we were going to say goodbye to these people. And I wanted really to reward our fans. Normally when you're writing a show, in one sense, you're trying to please your fans who already like the show. And you're also trying to get new people on board, and you hope the word is spreading and so on. But I didn't feel that about this film. I felt we were thanking our fans for being faithful for so long and giving them, I hope, a good cry at the end and all the rest of it. And in a way, I think the grand finale is the most direct message from the production team to our faithful fans that we've made, really. And I hope they enjoy it, and I wish them well.
Well, they clearly have enjoyed it. A huge box office success, critical acclaim galore. Just had a text message saying, doesn't sound like Julian's ruling out a prequel.
Well, I'm not ruling anything out, really, because a lifetime in show business has taught me not to do that. And sooner say, oh, we will never do this or we will never do that, then you find yourself 3 weeks later roughing out and, the next episode. But I am happy to say we will never go back to Hugh Bonneville and Elizabeth McGovern and so on. I feel we have played out their characters and they have played them out. I think we were incredibly lucky with the cast, actually. There's a lot of luck involved. People whose things have gone well and imply it's all the product of good judgment and good decisions. It's all rubbish. That you make decisions that you hope are the right ones, and quite often they are, and sometimes they're not. But in this show, I think we were pretty lucky all the way through, really. I mean, from the initial casting, quite often you don't get the actor you're desperate for, not for any bad feeling or anything, but because they're already committed to a series that's being made in the Netherlands, whatever. And you just then have to rethink it. But we didn't have to rethink it. I don't know how, but we somehow struck a period when practically nothing else was going on. And we got our first choices for everyone. And that was, that was a good start, actually. That was a good sort of pump up at the beginning. And then we made the show, the first series. And we had a dinner, after the screening. We had a sort of guest screening thing on the South Bank, and then we all went to some swanky French restaurant. And sometimes those things are a bit grim, as you know, and people make their excuses, and they've got to get up early, or the dog's got to be taken for a walk or something, and they zoom off. But actually, this party went on until about 2:30 in the morning. And that was, again, I thought, well, they like the show and they think it's going to be great. And here they still are 2 hours later drinking. And again, looking back, that was a happy foreteller of our fortunes to come. And then we started showing it and it became very popular, more or less at once. Quite why, obviously everyone asked me, why do you think Downton was so popular? I don't know. And I don't think any of us know. We put all the ingredients together that we think they'll like such and such a show. And sometimes they do. But sometimes they don't. And you've got to stay on the back foot, really. For and mind you, I think it's probably true in many other walks of life. You mustn't pin too much on the success of this or that. You've always got to leave a little bit of space for the public to have their say and to listen to what they're saying. And I've always tried to do that. I think a great preparation for being a writer was being an actor, and also being, I was a sort of working actor. I mean, by the end, I was a running character in series and things, but I tended to be the second cousin who fell downstairs, And of course, when you have that career, what it means is a lot of the time you're patching up not very good scripts and you're filling in and you're trying to make them work. And you look at them and you realize this character has no emotional logic at all. So you try to impose emotional logic on it so that there is some sort of emotional story being told. And looking back, I think that was a fantastic training. I mean, I've got other friends who were instantly tremendously successful as actors and went more or less straight to the top. And of course, that was lovely and good luck to them. But by the same token, I don't think they spent much time patching together bad scripts. On the whole, the scripts they were offered was jolly good. I think that's great for an actor. But for a writer, I think perhaps having to make do with scripts that were not up to much was a much better training. And that really was my sort of start in the whole game.
That's a brilliant insight. Lovely. Thank you for a lovely rounded answer. And then, I mean, The Gilded Age has been another mammoth hit for you. And the 4th season is filming as we speak. What's been the most enjoyable aspect of that work?
Well, The Gilded Age, I got interested in long before anyone thought of it as a television show. It was just a period of history. I think a friend of mine gave me for a birthday that book about Alva Vanderbilt and her daughter Consuelo, who became the Duchess of Marlborough. And I read it, and this extraordinary period after the American Civil War, a very savage war in which many, many people died, and so a very dark period of American history. But then what it did do was it sort of opened America up in a way that is difficult to explain, but it's there. That at the end of the war in the 1870s, suddenly there were all these new people. There were all these war profiteers, of whom there are always plenty, and in every major city in America, and there were no rules. Nobody thought of any rules at all. So they were operating, I mean, insider trading. They wouldn't have known what you were talking about. And so this kind of Wild West attitude to a new economy that burst on the world and within a very few years became the biggest economy in the world and placed America to be the loudest voice in the peace talks after both world wars, but B, generally made the 20th century the American century. The overture to that was The Gilded Age. And the more I read about it, the more I read about Jay Gould and all these people, the more fascinated I became. And someone gave me a book of the palaces that had once existed in New York. And I had it with me in New York, and I was walking around these. And of course, most of them on Fifth Avenue were demolished and replaced by blocks of rather dull concrete flats. But if you go in a little bit or a little further up into the 70s and 80s, you can still find the Gilded Age palaces. They're mostly now parts of embassies or parts of universities or whatever it is. But they still exist as buildings. And I saw this whole extraordinary kind of neo-Renaissance society of these super rich, incredibly ambitious men and women who decided, no, they didn't want to go on with imitating Europe. That was all fine for before the Civil War, and they could do that. But they'd had enough of that. They wanted it to be done the American way. And they devised this new kind of society, a mixture of old and new, because Mrs. Astor, who felt she was uniquely qualified to lead this new society, as she'd been born of Schermerhorn, which was an old Dutch family, but she'd married an Astor, which, while not brand new in the 1880s, was still newish. And she felt very qualified to, arbitrate these two groups of people. And she created this society, and it had a kind of dynamism, it had a kind of speed. They wanted to live in a way that made everyone think they were the Duke of Devonshire, but they didn't want to wait 4 generations to do it. They wanted to get on with it right now. And that put a kind of zip into the whole thing. And as I was reading it, yes, I mean, of course, in some ways, they were the robber barons that they've gone down into history as, but the robber barons made America strong enough to tell the world what to do for 100 years. And so it's all quite complicated when you are in the business of condemning this group or praising that group. But I'm, on the whole, not in the business of either. I, on the whole, like to see what this group got up to and that group got up to, and which bits of it one approves of and which perhaps less so. So it became naturally a subject for me. And then someone came to me, I think, did I have any ideas that I wanted to pursue as a drama series form? And I felt that the Americans, they have a very interesting history, even though a lot of them are not aware of that, because on the whole, the American dynamic, the American energy is towards what's coming next, what's new, what's the new big thing. And in a way, I felt that the Gilded Age was both interesting for people who were interested in history, but at the same time had a kind of modern dynamic. I mean, when Elon Musk and whoever it was were racing their rockets to the moon and everything, while we were making the second series, and I thought, this is a Gilded Age activity. They didn't have any rockets, but if they had, this is exactly what they would have been doing. And somehow there was a kind of then and now thing that I think made it feel right for television. And then I started to put it together as an actual TV drama show with old and new New York fighting it out, which is really very much to do with what was going on at that time. So I've enjoyed it really, and I feel very lucky that I've been allowed to kind of explore American history. I mean, actually, I have a co-writer in it called Sonia Warfield, and she is American. She's a woman, which I'm not, and so, and she's also Black, which I'm not, and she's been very helpful to me. Actually, funnily enough, I think probably they thought that she was going to help me with various aspects of the Black story and this and that and the other. But really, she's helped me by being American. And at certain times I'm saying, oh, well, I'm writing a script. Oh, well, she's very upset about it. And Sonia will say, oh, no, she wouldn't be upset about that. She'd be upset about this. And I found that very useful and very helpful. And it's a partnership that's not only worked for me, which it has, and worked for the show, but also taught me quite a lot about being American, which I'm very grateful for, actually, and I've found very interesting. So the whole experience has been a lucky one for me.
I mean, that really is, again, you on your journey and finding these connections. And you mentioned it earlier, your advice to young people about growing. You yourself are heeding those words. And it is interesting because we'd spoken earlier before this, and I think this speaks to very much to you, Julian, as a man, as a creative and a power force in the industry. You said to me, and if you ask a question, I'd love you to ask me about the aspect of those who are perhaps not in show business, the Hollywood industry, that have a passion, but worry that their passion, their desire to create is unachievable because there are barriers between them and the arts. And you wanted to reflect on that and discuss that.
Well, I do feel quite strongly about that, actually. I think it's important that the young don't see certain areas and careers and so on as unachievable. I mean, they're unachievable if they've got no gift for them. But as long as they've got a gift for them and an instinct and the feeling for them, they are achievable if they can only see it. And I think that the greatest, I mean, of course, you often hear people saying, did you grow up in show business and there's your mother as an actress or whatever. But I didn't have any of that. I didn't have a background in show business at all. But I think that the real distinction in childhood, which is important, is that if you are lucky to come from some families, I don't actually make the obvious distinctions of money or class or any of those things. It's more to do with the dynamic that in some families, anything is possible. And in some families, very little is possible beyond the usual. And if you are a creative, interesting person who wants to have a varied career and go out beyond the experience you've known so far with your own family and everything. Of course, if you've got a family that are saying, yes, everything's right, yes, do this, go to New York, that's all great. But if you're coming from a family who says, oh, forget that, that's not going to happen, blah, 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 you've got to be born with this, this, and this before that's going to happen. You have to fight against that. And you have to get up to New York or to London or to Paris or Rome or wherever it is. And you have to do what you can to go. In London, you go to the bar theaters where everyone comes down for a drink after the show. And you stay in there and you have a drink with them. And you meet them and you meet the directors. And you go for jobs cleaning in theaters, not because you want to be a cleaner, but because you want to talk to people who are working in those theaters. And you want to work at being a member of the world that you want to live in. And that's really one of the first stages. I mean, for me, I didn't so much have those difficulties because I grew up in a fairly privileged way, not as privileged as the newspapers would have it, but nevertheless, reasonably privileged. But for me, my problem was convincing people that I was serious about going into show business. It was just assumed, it was a kind of joke that I was having with myself. And soon I would wake up and go back to the city or whatever was going to happen. And I had to persuade people, no, I want to do this. And I had got myself a job as, in those days, acting assisting stage manager, whatever it was. And I would be making props under the stage and earning £18 a week to prove that this is what I really want to do. I'm not pretending. And then, every now and then you have a bit of luck. I mean, with me, I was made understudy of Henry VIII in A Man for All Seasons in Northampton Rep. And happily, the actor playing him was ill. So for a day, I was rehearsing Henry VIII, and then he decided he was well enough to play it. But nevertheless, what that day had given me was the chance to audition for the director of the show who ran the theater. And in the next time he gave me a part. And then in the next season, he took me on as one of the actors. And I was off, not quite to the races at that point, but I had at least begun. And, you just have to, I suppose, you stand there waiting for any door to open just a little bit. And you get your foot in and you make it everything. That's the only thing I would say is I think in the early years, you have to make it everything. And later, wives and children and happiness all has to wait. And you worry about that later. First, worry about getting started.
I'm so glad you talked about that, and I'm so glad you covered that. Not only because it gives people an insight into your journey, you didn't just fall into it, but also there are so many people watching today who are joining us who can relate to that. People think they're a success overnight, and so many of the members of the BABC LA and the people joining us today are absolutely aware of that journey. I just want to say to you, we have a great audience with us today. So many distinguished guests and organizations. Just want to shout out the executives of Amazon, BAFTA, St. Andrew's Society, Visit Britain, the Costume Designers Guild. I know you've worked so much with them. But we have some questions as well from some of those joining them. So I just want to ask you a couple of those. Kimberly Bradford asks, what would you consider your big break in the business, given you've just been talking about that? What was it, Monarch of the Glen?
Well, you have different breaks, but really my big break, because there is a kind of, in a way, a rather random decision as to which young actors are going to work and which are not. And it's always quite difficult to put your reasons on why these people slipped through and these didn't. And it's not as simple as saying all the ones who work are good looking, because they're not, and you somehow have to be in the right place at the right time. And for me, it was a play called A Touch of Spring. And it was written by the guy who wrote Sabrina Fair, Sam Taylor, I think. And what had happened is someone had dropped out of a part. And the reason they dropped out is that in the last act, they had to fall down a staircase. It was a comedy. And they had to fall down a staircase. And I arrived at the audition for this. And it was, quite a good part, much better than anything I'd played that far. And then they explained about the staircase. And they said, do you feel confident you're trained enough to fall down the staircase? So I said, oh, yes. Yeah, no problem with that. And of course, I'd never fallen down a staircase in my life, that I was determined to get this part. And so I stood there and we were doing the read-through, and I just thought, well, here goes. And I put my foot out and fell the length of the stairs, and I was still alive at the bottom, and I got the part. And it ran for 15 months in London, and Hayley Mills was the star of the show. And I was in the West End, and I had begun. And from that came a couple of parts on television, and I then was picked up by the same producer to do a comedy in the West End. And really, that was one of my lucky breaks. I mean, another lucky break was when I was picked to make a film called Baby, about the baby dinosaur. And the guy playing it suddenly dropped out. I can't remember if he was ill or something like that. And they had to replace me at speed. And I got the part. So these lucky breaks, in a way, keep happening. But of course, my real lucky break was when Robert Altman had decided he was quite an unusual guy, actually, and he liked to take a form, a Western, but make a Western that wasn't really a Western, like McCabe and Mrs. Miller, or make a thriller that wasn't really a thriller. And he decided to make a whodunit, a sort of English country house whodunit, but somehow it was going to be different. And for some reason or other, they couldn't find a writer. Now, I have no idea why not. Robert Altman was a patron saint of the industry at that time, and he was clearly never going to make another English film. He'd never made one before, and he was already in his 70s. And they just couldn't get anyone to say yes. I personally, I've always thought it was my dead mother going around to Tom Stoppard's house and whispering in his ear at night, "Don't do it." But anyway, they all said no. And someone said to Robert Altman, "Look, there is this guy. You won't have heard of him. He's never had a film made, but this is his stuff. This is what he does." And eventually, he asked me to write some character notes on a piece of paper and send them in. I did, and then I was commissioned to write a first draft. But he told me later, he said, "I never believed until I read the first draft there was any chance at all that it was going to be real." And I was the same, because I thought a famous director suddenly leans in and asks you to write a script. It's not going to get made. But it did get made. It was called Gosford Park, and it was released, and I won the Oscar, and I was off to the races. And that was my lucky break. And actually, it was extraordinary. You couldn't make it work in a film because everyone would say it's too unlikely. that was what happened to me.
Beautiful. Thank you. Another question from board member and producer Leslie O'Toole, who's asked about Hollywood studios and their commissioning process. He's written a period drama, but is often faced with the reaction of, "Oh, there's no market for that. Only for shows like yours to be global hits." He asked for your kind of take and insight on that at the moment, that narrative that's going on in Hollywood.
Well, one mustn't get too caught up in all the reasons why you're not going to be a success. On the whole, I think it's a good idea to ignore them most of the time and then see if it works for you or it doesn't. It's perfectly true that when I wrote Gosford Park, and indeed later, even more so, when I was asked by Gareth Neame to write the show that became Downton Abbey, at that time, there was thinking going around that the audience for period drama was dead, that they weren't there anymore. But happily, Peter Fincher at ITV didn't agree with this, and he was looking for a period drama. I read later that we'd been turned down by the BBC, and then all of that's absolutely hooey. We weren't turned down by anyone because we went straight to Peter Fincher at ITV because that's what he was looking for. And we went, and he decided that this was the period drama that he had been in search of. But, everyone said to him, "You're mad, Peter, you'll tie up half your annual allowance for drama and nobody's going to watch it." Blah, 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 yeah. But he was sure he was right. And he was right. And, in the end, you need a couple of these brave people. They're very important for building other careers. And Peter was a brave man. He had plenty to lose. He'd had a rather uncomfortable time at the BBC, and he was now at ITV, and in a sense proving himself, except that we're all proving ourselves in this business, every job we do. But nevertheless, he was, that was him. And he just was sure that this was right and the right time and everything. And I profited from that. I was a beneficiary of his surety. And I was jolly lucky. And there we were. We made the show. And it was popular very quickly. Normally, they do a big publicity thingamy and the advertisements on the way in from Heathrow and so on. And then you get a big figure for the first show, and then it goes down for the people who don't really like that sort of stuff, whatever it is. And then it picks up again in the third. But we went up 2.5 million on the second. And they all thought that this was a mistake because you always go down. But it wasn't a mistake. And the reason nobody had watched any period drama was because there hadn't been any period drama for them to watch. And there we were. And we had a success. And then, of course, later, America joined. And by then we had this extraordinary period of being one of the kind of world shows, you know. And I think for most of us anyway, it was really good fun to be part of that phenomenon. And I know that when I meet, you know, Elizabeth or whoever, when we're all 110, the fact that we were together on Downton and we enjoyed those kind of crazy years will be a sort of club, really, that we belong to. And it for me, it was a very happy time. I mean, of course, I never dare say it was for everyone, because then you get a letter from someone saying, I've never had a worse 2 years of my life. But for most of us, I think it was a pretty happy time.
And of course, you brought so much joy to so many people around the world. And finally, I love this question. This is from John Litchfield. You're a gentleman that appears to have a fulfilling life. Do you have a passion for a certain hobby or even time for one?
I don't think, I mean, I used to be quite a keen shot, not a very good shot, except for the odd occasional rather blessed day. But I enjoyed that very much socially as everything else, and the dinners and the luncheons and the going to stay in the country and so on and so on. All of that I enjoyed, and that was fun. But I would say my only real hobby has been to, as far as possible, to recollect a lot of family stuff that was sold between the wars, and I have managed to get back quite a few pictures. One I found in San Antonio, Texas, of one of my great uncles, Peregrine Fellowes, and that's been rather satisfactory, actually. I've enjoyed that, and people have been very nice. And it's fun enough, it's one area where being a little bit famous has been useful, because people look you up, and if you're connected to their picture that they're trying to sell, then they write to you. So that's been rather good.